It was a cold October night when Jason, a college student, took up the night shift at the local gas station. The station was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense woods. His friends had warned him about the eerie place, but he needed the money. Besides, he didn't believe in ghost stories. The first few hours were uneventful. He served a few late-night travelers, mostly truckers and a couple of locals. As the clock struck midnight, the station fell silent. Jason felt an uncomfortable chill in the air. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long, eerie shadows across the deserted lot. Jason was scrolling through his phone when he heard a faint whisper. He looked up, but no one was there. Dismissing it as his imagination, he returned to his phone. A few minutes later, the whisper came again, this time louder and clearer. "Help me," it said. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He stepped outside the booth and called out, but there was no response. The whispering continued, growing more insistent. Jason decided to check the security cameras. What he saw sent shivers down his spine. A dark figure was standing near the edge of the woods, just outside the camera's reach. It was barely visible, but its eyes glowed a haunting red. Jason's hand trembled as he dialed the police. He reported a possible trespasser, but the dispatcher seemed unconcerned. "Probably just some pranksters," she said. "We'll send someone over." Jason waited, his eyes darting between the door and the monitor. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the police car arrived. Officer Miller, a burly man with a no-nonsense attitude, stepped out. Jason explained the situation and showed him the footage. The officer frowned but agreed to check the perimeter. Miller disappeared into the darkness, his flashlight beam cutting through the night. Jason watched from the safety of the booth. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out. Jason's blood ran cold as he heard a blood-curdling scream echo through the trees. Jason rushed outside, shouting for the officer. He found Miller's flashlight on the ground, but the officer was nowhere to be seen. Panic set in. He ran back to the booth and locked the door, frantically trying to reach the dispatcher again. The whispering returned, now accompanied by a low, sinister laughter. Jason could feel eyes on him, watching from the shadows. He glanced at the monitor and saw the dark figure standing closer, its eyes burning brighter. The door rattled violently. Jason backed away, clutching a wrench as his only weapon. The figure was now visible through the glass, a grotesque skeletal form with tattered clothes and a face twisted in a permanent scream. Suddenly, the figure vanished. The door stopped shaking and the whispering ceased. Jason's relief was short-lived. The lights flickered again, and he heard heavy footsteps behind him. He turned around slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. There, standing in the middle of the room, was the dark figure. Its eyes bore into his soul, and its mouth opened wide, emitting a chilling wail. Jason stumbled backward, tripping over a chair. He scrambled to his feet and ran outside. The police car was still there, but the officer was gone. Jason didn't care. He jumped in and sped away, not daring to look back. The gas station disappeared in the rearview mirror, but the terror lingered. Jason never returned to that gas station. He told his friends and the authorities what happened, but no one believed him. The police officer was never found, and the station was eventually shut down due to mysterious circumstances. To this day, Jason can't shake the feeling that he's being watched. Sometimes, late at night, he hears the whispering again. "Help me," it says, echoing in his mind, reminding him of the nightmare he can never escape. Sarah loved driving at night. The open road, the cool breeze, and the starry sky were her companions on long trips. She often stopped at a small gas station on Route 66, run by an old man named Joe. It was a quaint place with a rustic charm, and Joe's friendly demeanor always made her feel welcome. One night, Sarah was driving back home after visiting a friend. As she approached the gas station, she saw a hitchhiker standing by the road. He looked young, maybe in his early 20s, with disheveled hair and a worn-out backpack. Feeling a pang of sympathy, she decided to give him a ride. The hitchhiker introduced himself as Tom and thanked her profusely. He mentioned that he was heading to a town nearby and had been stranded for hours. Sarah smiled and assured him it was no trouble. They chatted casually as they drove, and Tom seemed friendly enough. When they reached the gas station, Sarah decided to fill up her tank. Tom offered to help, and she agreed. Joe greeted them with his usual warm smile, but Sarah noticed a strange look in his eyes when he saw Tom. She brushed it off and went inside to grab a snack. As she paid for her items, Joe leaned in and whispered, "Be careful, miss. There's something off about that boy." Sarah was taken aback. Joe had never been one to judge strangers. She glanced outside and saw Tom standing by the pump, looking around nervously. Dismissing Joe's warning, Sarah got back in the car and continued her journey with Tom. As they drove through the dark, winding roads, the conversation grew more unsettling. Tom started talking about bizarre topics, like his fascination with death and the afterlife. Sarah's unease grew. She noticed Tom occasionally glancing at her with a strange, almost predatory look. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. She decided to drop him off at the next town, no matter how far it was. Suddenly, Tom's demeanor changed. He became agitated, demanding that she take a detour through a deserted road. Sarah refused, but Tom's insistence grew more aggressive. He reached for the steering wheel, trying to force her to turn. Panic set in. Sarah slammed on the brakes, and the car screeched to a halt. She screamed at Tom to get out, but he just stared at her, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. In a fit of terror, she pushed him away and sped off, leaving him standing in the middle of the road. Shaking and breathless, Sarah drove to the nearest town and found a police station. She reported the incident, but when the officers went to investigate, there was no sign of Tom. They assured her they'd keep an eye out, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The next day, she returned to the gas station to thank Joe for his warning. Joe listened quietly, his expression grave. When she finished, he told her about a hitchhiker who had died in a car accident near the station years ago. He was known to haunt the area, seeking rides from unsuspecting drivers. Sarah's blood ran cold. She realized she had encountered the ghost of the hitchhiker. Joe advised her to take a different route in the future and to be cautious of picking up strangers. Sarah nodded, still shaken by the ordeal. Despite Joe's advice, Sarah couldn't resist the urge to drive past the spot where she had left Tom. One night, curiosity got the better of her. She drove slowly, her eyes scanning the road. To her horror, she saw Tom standing there, just as she had left him. His eyes met hers, and he smiled, a twisted, malevolent grin. Sarah's heart raced as she sped away, but the image of Tom's haunting face lingered in her mind. She vowed never to return to that road again. Sarah moved to a new town and avoided night drives altogether, but every so often, she hears stories of a mysterious hitchhiker on Route 66. Each tale sends chills down her spine, a reminder of the night she narrowly escaped the grip of a restless spirit. Mark was a seasoned truck driver, accustomed to long hauls and solitary nights. He had a routine: drive until fatigue set in, then stop at the nearest gas station to rest. One particular station, located off a forgotten highway, became his regular stop. The station was old, with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. The restrooms, however, were always clean, a rare find on the road. Mark appreciated that, and the station's remote location meant it was usually quiet. One rainy night, Mark pulled in, exhausted. The station was empty, save for the attendant, a quiet man named Bill. Mark nodded to him and headed to the restroom. As he washed his hands, he heard a faint sobbing sound. He paused, listening intently. The sobbing grew louder, echoing off the tiled walls. Mark checked the stalls, but they were empty. He shrugged it off as his tired mind playing tricks and went back to his truck to sleep. But the sobbing stayed with him, haunting his dreams. The next night, Mark found himself at the same station. The rain had stopped, but a thick fog enveloped the area. He decided to confront Bill about the sobbing. Bill's face turned pale. "You heard it, didn't you?" he whispered. Bill explained that years ago, a young woman had been murdered in the restroom. Her killer was never found, and her spirit was said to haunt the place, crying for justice. Mark felt a chill run down his spine, but tried to brush it off. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the sobbing, louder and more desperate. He decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he crept back to the restroom. The sobbing was unmistakable now, filling the room with a sorrowful wail. Mark called out, asking the spirit what it wanted. The sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Suddenly, the mirror fogged up, and a message appeared. "Help me." Mark's heart pounded as he realized the spirit was reaching out to him. Determined to help, Mark delved into the woman's case. He spent days at the local library, searching through old newspapers and records. He discovered her name was Emily, and she had been a college student with a bright future. Emily's murder had shocked the small town, but the investigation had gone cold. Mark visited the police station and spoke with a retired detective who had worked the case. The detective shared his suspicions about a local man who had vanished shortly after the murder. Mark decided to find this man. He followed a trail of rumors and hearsay, leading him to a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. The man, a reclusive drifter named Jack, was living in squalor. Mark confronted him, demanding the truth. Jack broke down, confessing to the murder. He claimed it was an accident, a moment of rage that spiraled out of control. Mark recorded the confession and took it to the police. Jack was arrested, and Emily's case was finally closed. That night, Mark returned to the gas station. He went to the restroom, hoping to find peace for Emily's spirit. The sobbing was gone, replaced by a gentle, almost grateful whisper. "Thank you," it said, echoing softly in the room. Mark felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had helped a lost soul find peace and brought justice to a long-forgotten crime. He left the gas station, feeling a sense of fulfillment and closure. Mark continued his journeys, but he never forgot Emily. Occasionally, he would stop by the gas station, finding solace in the quiet nights and the knowledge that he had made a difference. The restroom, once haunted by sorrow, now stood as a silent testament to a life avenged and a spirit set free.